"Please stop," cried a poor single dad, dragging the teen off the train tracks, only to discover the girl he saved was tied to the very family that once destroyed his life. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The evening air hung heavy with autumn's chill as Ethan Cole trudged home from his shift at Jerry's Diner. His worn work shoes scuffed against the cracked sidewalk, each step a reminder of another long day. The plastic grocery bag crinkled in his grip, holding the day-old bread and marked-down milk he'd managed to buy with his employee discount. A ghost of a smile crossed his tired face as he thought of Lily waiting at home with Mrs. Henderson, their elderly neighbor. His daughter never complained about the simple meals or hand-me-down clothes. Instead, she'd greet him with those bright eyes and a warm hug that made every double shift worth it. The distant rumble of an approaching train pulled him from his thoughts. The crossing signals began to flash red, their warning bells clanging through the gathering dusk. That's when he saw her, a slender figure standing perfectly still on the tracks, her dark hair whipping in the wind. Ethan's heart lurched. "Hey!" he shouted, but the girl didn't move. The train's headlight cut through the dimness, growing larger by the second. The horn blared, long and loud. Without thinking, Ethan dropped his grocery bag. The milk carton burst on impact, spreading across the sidewalk like spilled moonlight. His feet pounded against the gravel as he ran, each second stretching into eternity. The girl still hadn't moved, her face eerily calm as she stared down the approaching train. "No!" The word tore from his throat as he reached her. His arms wrapped around her waist, and he yanked her backward with all his strength. They tumbled onto the grass beside the tracks just as the train thundered past, so close that the rush of air tousled their hair and made their clothes snap like flags in a storm. For a moment, they lay there, the ground cold and damp beneath them, their breathing ragged. Then the girl began to shake, small tremors at first, building into full-body sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. Ethan sat up slowly, his own hands trembling from adrenaline. The girl curled into herself, her thin shoulders heaving with each gasping cry. She couldn't have been more than 15 or 16, about the same age as his late wife had been when they'd first met in high school. "It's okay," he said softly, the words feeling inadequate against the magnitude of what had almost happened. "You're safe now." The girl lifted her head, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Her eyes were a startling blue, filled with such raw pain that it made his chest ache. She reached out suddenly, grabbing his arm with desperate strength. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, don't let me go." The words hit him like a physical blow. How many times had he wished someone had been there to hold on to him when Sarah died? How many nights had he sat alone, trying to be strong for Lily while feeling like he was drowning in grief? "I won't," he promised, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't let go." The girl's grip tightened, and she pressed her face against his jacket, her tears soaking through to his shirt. Ethan hesitated for just a moment before putting his arm around her shoulders. She felt too thin, too fragile, like a bird that had fallen from its nest. The train's whistle faded into the distance, leaving them in the growing darkness. Crickets chirped in the tall grass around them, and somewhere nearby, a car door slammed. The ordinary sounds of life continuing on, oblivious to the tragedy that had almost unfolded here. Ethan knew he should call the police or find out where this girl belonged, but her plea echoed in his mind. "Please don't let me go." There was something in her voice that spoke of more than just this moment. It was the sound of someone who had been let go too many times before. They sat there on the grass by the tracks, this broken girl holding on to him like he was the only solid thing in her world. Ethan thought of Lily waiting at home, probably working on her homework at the kitchen table, safe and loved. This girl deserved to feel that way too. The spilled milk from his dropped groceries gleamed in the streetlight, a reminder of the simple errand that had put him in the right place at the right time. Or maybe, he thought, looking down at the girl still clinging to his arm, it had put him exactly where he needed to be. "Please don't let me go," she whispered again, softer this time, as if she was afraid he might disappear if she loosened her grip. "I'm right here," he assured her, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm not going anywhere." The night settled around them, the air growing cooler. The girl's sobs gradually quieted to hiccuping breaths, but she didn't let go of his arm. Ethan sat quietly, being the anchor she so desperately needed in this moment, wondering what storms in her life had driven her to this dark place. The bell above the door chimed weakly as Ethan guided the shaking teenager into Lou's all-night diner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the worn checkerboard tiles and faded red vinyl booths. At this hour, the place was empty except for Marco, the night cook, who peered through the service window with concerned eyes. "Corner booth, okay?" Ethan asked softly. The girl nodded, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She slid into the far side of the booth, pressing herself against the window as if trying to disappear into its frame. The vinyl seat creaked as Ethan settled across from her. Up close, in the diner's unforgiving light, he could see dark circles under her eyes and a small tear in her jacket sleeve. Her brown hair fell in tangles around her face, and her fingernails were bitten down to the quick. "I'm Ethan," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "Would you like something to eat? The French toast here is pretty good, even at midnight." She glanced up briefly, then back down at her hands. "Madison," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. "My name's Madison." "Nice to meet you, Madison." Ethan caught Marco's eye and held up 2 fingers. The cook nodded, already reaching for the coffee pot. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but I'd feel better knowing you've got something warm in your stomach." Marco shuffled over, setting down 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "You want the usual, Ethan?" His eyes flickered to Madison with quiet concern. "French toast for both of us, please. Extra syrup." Ethan wrapped his hands around his mug, letting the warmth seep into his tired fingers. "And maybe some bacon?" Madison's shoulders relaxed slightly at the mention of food. She reached for her coffee with trembling hands, adding 3 packets of sugar and enough cream to turn it pale beige. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the hum of the fluorescent lights and distant clatter of cooking providing a gentle backdrop. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights sweeping across the window and briefly illuminating Madison's face. She looked so young, so lost. "I have a daughter," Ethan said finally, pulling out his worn leather wallet. He showed Madison a slightly creased photo of Lily, gap-toothed and beaming, her dark curls in messy pigtails. "She's 8. Makes me read Goodnight Moon every night, even though she knows it by heart." Madison's eyes lingered on the photo. Something in her expression softened, just a fraction. "She looks happy," she murmured. "She is, most of the time. Kids are resilient that way." Ethan tucked the photo back into his wallet. They can find joy in the smallest things, even when times are tough. Marco arrived with their food, setting down plates piled high with golden brown French toast and crispy bacon. Madison stared at her plate for a moment before picking up her fork with barely contained urgency. She cut off a small piece, then another, trying to maintain composure but clearly starving. "Take your time," Ethan said gently. "There's plenty more if you're still hungry after." Madison paused mid-bite, her cheeks flushing. "Sorry, it's been a while." "No need to apologize. I've had my share of hungry days." Ethan sprinkled some sugar on his French toast, giving her time to eat without feeling watched. They were halfway through their meals when Madison spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't go back." Ethan set down his fork, waiting. "To the foster home?" she continued, gripping her coffee mug like a lifeline. "Please don't make me go back there, I'd rather." Her voice cracked, and she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The weight of what she wasn't saying hung heavy in the air. Ethan thought of the train tracks, of her vacant eyes, of the way she'd whispered, "Please don't let me go." "How long have you been running?" he asked quietly. 3 days. Madison pushed a piece of bacon around her plate. I thought anywhere would be better than there, but nobody helps. Nobody wants to get involved. They just call social services." And then she shuddered. Ethan looked out the diner window at the empty street. The neon open sign cast alternating red and blue shadows across the cracked pavement. A few blocks away, he could see the railroad crossing where he'd found her, its warning lights still blinking steadily in the darkness. He thought about his tiny 2-bedroom apartment, with its second-hand furniture and water stains on the ceiling. About Lily, who would be asleep in her narrow bed, surrounded by her beloved stuffed animals. About the envelope of carefully counted bills in his dresser drawer, barely enough for next month's rent. But he also thought about Madison standing on those tracks, about the look in her eyes that spoke of too much pain for someone so young, about his own daughter, and what he would want someone to do if she were ever alone and afraid in the middle of the night. "Listen," he said, meeting her eyes across the table. I have a couch. It's not much, but it's warm and safe. You can stay tonight, get some real sleep, and tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next. Okay? Madison's eyes filled with tears. She nodded quickly, wiping her face with her sleeve. Marco, Ethan called out, reaching for his wallet. Can we get the check? The cook waved him off. On the house, Ethan. You two get some rest. Ethan stood, shrugging off his jacket and draping it over Madison's shoulders. She pulled it close, disappearing into its warmth as they stepped out into the quiet night. The key turned quietly in the lock as morning light crept through the hallway windows of the apartment building. Ethan pushed open the door, gesturing for Madison to wait just a moment. He'd barely taken a step inside when rapid footsteps echoed across the worn hardwood floor. Daddy! Lily burst from her small bedroom, her brown curls bouncing wildly, still in her favorite pink unicorn pajamas. She launched herself into his arms with practiced ease, and Ethan caught her, spinning her once before setting her down. Hey, sweetheart, you're up early, he said, brushing her messy hair from her face. Listen, I have someone. But Lily had already spotted Madison hovering in the doorway. Instead of shrinking back, Lily's eyes widened with curiosity. She tilted her head, studying the teenage girl with the kind of open wonder only children possess. Hi, I'm Lily, she announced, taking a step forward. Your eyes look sad. Do you want to see my stuffed penguin? He makes me feel better when I'm sad. Madison stood frozen, her defensive posture softening slightly at the child's innocent greeting. Her eyes darted between Lily and Ethan, uncertainty written across her face. This is Madison, Ethan explained gently. She's going to have breakfast with us this morning. He squeezed Lily's shoulder. Why don't you show her your penguin while I make us some eggs? Lily's face lit up. She reached for Madison's hand without hesitation, and to everyone's surprise, Madison let her take it. His name is Waddles, Lily explained, leading Madison to the small living room. Daddy got him for me when I was really sick last winter. The apartment was modest. Just 2 small bedrooms, a bathroom, and an open living room that flowed into a tiny kitchen. The furniture was well worn but clean, with colorful drawings taped to the walls and a bookshelf overflowing with children's stories. It wasn't much, but it felt lived in and warm. Ethan moved to the kitchen, keeping an eye on the girls while he pulled out eggs and bread. He could hear Lily's animated chatter as she showed Madison her prized possession. See, his bow tie is crooked because I tried to fix it myself, Lily was saying. Daddy offered to sew it, but I like it this way. It makes him special. A ghost of a smile crossed Madison's face as she held the stuffed penguin. He's very nice, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The smell of butter melting in the pan filled the small apartment. Ethan cracked eggs with practiced ease, adding a pinch of salt and pepper. The toaster popped, and he arranged the golden brown slices on 3 plates. Lily, honey, can you help set the table? He called. Lily jumped up eagerly. Madison, you can sit next to me. She pulled out chairs at their small round table, carefully placing forks and napkins, while Madison watched with a mix of longing and disbelief. When the eggs were done, Ethan served them up, making sure Madison's plate had an extra piece of toast. They sat together, this strange new trio, as morning light streamed through the kitchen window. Thank you, Madison murmured, staring at her plate as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. Daddy makes the best eggs, Lily declared, already digging in. He learned from working at the diner, right, Daddy? Ethan nodded, watching as Madison took her first careful bite. That's right, though I think Marco still makes them better than I do. No way, Lily protested loyally. She turned to Madison. Do you like them? Madison nodded, eating with the careful restraint of someone used to making food last. They're really good, she said, and this time her voice was stronger. As they ate, Lily chattered about school and her friends, filling the silence with innocent observations that somehow made everything feel more normal. Madison's shoulders gradually relaxed, and she even answered some of Lily's questions about her favorite colors and animals. After breakfast, Lily insisted on showing Madison her small collection of books. They sat on the floor together, Lily pointing out her favorite pictures, while Madison listened with genuine interest. Ethan cleaned up the kitchen, his heart aching at the sight of this teenage girl who so clearly needed kindness. The morning wore on, and Lily's endless energy finally began to fade. She climbed onto the worn brown couch, curling up against her father's side as he sat down to rest for a moment. Madison perched on the other end, watching as Ethan stroked his daughter's hair with gentle fingers. "Time for a nap, Princess?" he asked softly. Lily shook her head even as her eyes drooped. "Not sleepy," she mumbled, snuggling closer. Madison watched them, something raw and vulnerable crossing her face. As Lily's breathing evened out into sleep, Madison pulled her knees up to her chest and whispered so quietly Ethan almost missed it. "I wish I had a dad like you." The words hung in the air, heavy with years of longing and hurt. Ethan felt them settle around his heart like a physical weight, even as Lily slept peacefully against him, unaware of the profound moment she had helped create. The afternoon sun warmed the small neighborhood park, casting dappled shadows through the maple trees. Ethan sat on a weathered wooden bench, watching as Lily and Madison took turns pushing each other on the swings. The rusty chains creaked rhythmically, accompanied by bursts of genuine laughter that made his heart lighter. "Higher, Madison. I want to touch the clouds," Lily squealed, pumping her legs as Madison gave her another gentle push. "Careful there, Princess," Ethan called out, but he couldn't help smiling. It was the first time in hours he'd seen Madison's guard completely drop, her usual wariness replaced by something that made her look her actual age, just a 15-year-old girl playing with a child. "Your turn." Lily hopped off the swing, and after some coaxing, Madison took her place. Her long dark hair streamed behind her as Lily pushed with all her 8-year-old might. Ethan watched them, his mind churning with worry about what to do next. He couldn't keep Madison hidden forever, but the fear in her eyes, whenever he mentioned authorities, made his chest tighten. The sound of their shared laughter drifted across the playground, and he found himself wishing he could freeze this moment. After a while, Lily spotted her friend Emma from school at the sandbox and ran off to play, leaving Madison alone on the swing. She dragged her feet in the wood chips, slowing to a stop, and then walked over to sit beside Ethan on the bench. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Lily build elaborate sandcastles with her friend. Madison pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself small. "They forget to feed me sometimes," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the distance. "The Harrises, my foster parents. They say they're too busy, or that I should learn to take care of myself." She picked at a loose thread on her jeans. "Mrs. Harris locks the kitchen at night, says I eat too much and food is expensive." Ethan's hands clenched involuntarily. He thought of the hollow look in Madison's eyes when he'd first bought her dinner, how she devoured the simple meal like she hadn't eaten in days. "The worst part is when they act nice in front of other people," Madison continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like they're doing this amazing thing, taking in a troubled teen. But as soon as we're alone..." She shrugged, the gesture heavy with unspoken pain. "Madison," Ethan said gently, "what they're doing is wrong. We can report them. There are people who can help." "No!" Madison's head snapped up, panic flashing across her face. "Please! They'll just move me again. I've been in 6 different homes in the past 2 years. Some were even worse." She wrapped her arms tighter around her knees. "At least with the Harrises, I know what to expect." Ethan felt helpless anger building in his chest. He'd seen enough working at the diner to recognize the signs of neglect, but hearing Madison speak about it so matter-of-factly made him want to punch something. "I promise you," he said firmly, "I won't let anyone hurt you like that again. We'll figure something out." Madison's laugh was bitter, startling in its harshness. "That's what my birth mother said, you know, right before she signed away her rights." She kicked at the wood chips beneath her feet. "She's still alive, living somewhere in this city actually. Rich, from what I heard." Guess I wasn't fancy enough for her lifestyle. Ethan watched her face carefully, seeing the deep well of pain beneath her attempted indifference. "Have you ever met her?" "Once, about a year ago. I found her address and went to her house." Madison's voice grew tight. "She opened the door, took one look at me, and told me never to come back. Said she'd made her choice years ago and didn't want to revisit the past." She swiped quickly at her eyes. "I was just a mistake she needed to erase." "Madison." Ethan reached out, hesitated, then gently placed his hand on her shoulder. She stiffened for a moment before leaning slightly into the touch. "Listen to me. You are not a mistake. You're a bright, brave young woman who deserves so much better than what life has handed you." She looked up at him then, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. "Why are you being so nice to me? You don't even know me." "Because it's the right thing to do," Ethan said simply. And because everyone deserves to feel safe and cared for. Daddy! Lily's voice cut through the moment. Come look at our castle. We made a moat and everything. Be right there, sweetheart, Ethan called back. He turned to Madison. Want to help build a castle? A small smile tugged at her lips. Yeah, okay. They stood up, and Ethan was about to follow Madison toward the sandbox when movement caught his eye. Across the street, a woman in expensive-looking clothes stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring directly at Madison. There was something in her expression, recognition, shock, maybe fear, that made Ethan's stomach twist. Before he could get a better look, the woman turned sharply and hurried away, her heels clicking rapidly on the pavement. Unease crept up Ethan's spine as he watched her disappear around the corner. Madison hadn't noticed, already kneeling in the sand beside Lily, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted, like the first rumble of distant thunder before a storm. The small kitchen felt cozy despite its worn linoleum floor and dated cabinets. Ethan moved quietly around the cramped space, stirring cocoa powder into 2 mugs of warm milk. He just finished tucking Lily into bed, reading her favorite story about a brave little rabbit until her eyes fluttered closed. Madison sat at the scratched kitchen table, her fingers fidgeting with the frayed sleeve of her oversized sweater. The yellowish light from the overhead fixture cast shadows under her eyes, making her look even more exhausted than before. Here you go, Ethan said softly, placing a steaming mug in front of her. Careful, it's hot. Thanks. Madison wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, inhaling the chocolatey aroma. I can't remember the last time someone made me hot cocoa. Ethan settled into the chair across from her, cradling his own mug. Madison, he began gently, I want to help you, but I need to know more about your situation. You mentioned your birth mother earlier. Madison's shoulders tensed. She stared down into the swirling brown liquid, her reflection rippling on its surface. What's there to know? She didn't want me then. Doesn't want me now. Sometimes things are complicated between parents and children, Ethan said carefully. Maybe if we reached out... No! Madison's voice cracked. She took a shaky breath. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell. It's just... You don't understand. She made it very clear where I stand. Tell me about her, Ethan encouraged, keeping his tone neutral despite the knot forming in his stomach. Something about Madison's story felt uncomfortably familiar. Madison took a small sip of cocoa before speaking. Her name is Grace Whitmore. She lives in one of those huge houses on Highland Avenue. She gave a bitter laugh. Funny, right? Me living in foster homes while she throws fancy parties and donates to charity. The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. His hand tightened around his mug as memories flooded back, memories he'd tried hard to forget. Grace Whitmore, the same Grace whose family had treated him like dirt beneath their shoes 25 years ago. Madison continued, oblivious to Ethan's reaction. She gave me up when I was a baby, but last year, I found her address and went to see her. Her voice grew smaller. I thought maybe she'd changed her mind about me. Ethan forced himself to breathe normally, to focus on Madison's pain rather than his own resurfacing hurt. What happened? She wouldn't even let me pass the front gate, said I was. Madison swallowed hard, a mistake she'd dealt with years ago, that I needed to respect her privacy and her new family. The words echoed with painful similarity to ones Ethan had heard decades before. Know your place, Cole. People like you don't belong in our world. He could still see Grace's father sneering down at him, could still feel the shame burning his cheeks as he stood on their manicured lawn, trying to explain that his feelings for Grace's friend were genuine despite his family's poverty. After that, Madison whispered, stirring her cocoa listlessly, I bounced between more foster homes. Some were okay, some weren't. The latest ones. She shuddered slightly. Well, you know how that turned out. Ethan watched this broken young girl, Grace Whitmore's daughter, sitting at his humble kitchen table. The universe had a strange sense of irony, bringing her into his life like this. The same family that had once judged him unworthy had produced a child they themselves deemed unworthy. Madison, he said softly, what happened with your mother? That's on her, not you. Some people, they get so caught up in appearances and status that they forget what really matters. She looked up at him then, her eyes glistening. Did you know her? You had this look when I said her name. Ethan hesitated, then nodded slowly. A long time ago. Let's just say I learned firsthand how particular the Whitmores could be about who they associated with. Madison's fingers tightened around her mug. Then you understand. She'll never want me. She said so herself. Her voice was barely audible, heavy with resignation. Looking at Madison's downcast face, Ethan felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. He wouldn't let the Whitmores' prejudices destroy another young life. Not this time. His own past hurt didn't matter. What mattered was the girl before him, desperate for love and acceptance. The kitchen clock ticked steadily in the silence between them. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the walls through the thin curtains. Ethan thought of Lily sleeping peacefully in the next room, of how every child deserved that same sense of security and belonging. In that moment, without speaking the words aloud, Ethan made a silent vow. He would not let history repeat itself. He would show Madison that her worth wasn't determined by the Whitmore standards, just as he'd finally learned his own worth wasn't. Whatever it took, he would help her find the belonging she so desperately sought. Morning sunlight streamed through the apartment's small windows, catching dust motes dancing in the air. The cramped kitchen buzzed with familiar morning activity as Ethan packed Lily's Wonder Woman lunchbox with a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a small bag of pretzels. "Don't forget your homework folder, sweetie," he called out, watching Lily dash around in her mismatched socks, searching for her favorite hair tie. Near the front door, Madison stood awkwardly, her backpack clutched tight against her chest like a shield. She wore the same clothes as yesterday, though Ethan had managed to wash them while she slept on their lumpy couch. Her eyes darted between the door and Ethan, uncertainty written across her face. Ethan noticed her unease as he helped Lily tie her shoes. His mind raced with competing thoughts. He knew he should call someone, the police, child services, anyone, but the terror in Madison's eyes when she spoke about her foster home made his stomach churn. The system that was supposed to protect her had already failed once. What if reporting her only made things worse? "Madison," he asked gently, "would you like some breakfast before we figure things out?" She shook her head, gripping her backpack tighter. "Maybe I should just go. I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not trouble," Ethan said firmly, standing up from helping Lily. "You're safe here." Lily looked up from her shoes, her face scrunched in confusion. "Where else would Madison go? She lives with us now." The simple certainty in Lily's voice made Madison's eyes well up with tears. Ethan watched as his daughter bounced over to Madison and took her hand, as naturally as if they'd known each other forever. "You're my big sister now," Lily declared, beaming up at the teenager. "And Daddy always says family sticks together." Madison's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Lily, then at Ethan, searching their faces for any sign of deception. Finding none, her shoulders relaxed slightly, and she loosened her death grip on the backpack. Madison started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never had a little sister before." Lily giggled. "Well, now you do, and you can help me with my math homework. I hate fractions." A small smile crept across Madison's face, the first genuine one Ethan had seen since meeting her. It transformed her entire appearance, making her look her actual age instead of the weight of years she usually carried. Ethan's heart clenched. He knew keeping Madison without reporting it was probably illegal. But looking at her now, seeing that spark of hope in her eyes, he couldn't bring himself to make the call. Not yet. Not until he found a way to ensure she wouldn't end up back in a place that would crush that fragile smile. "Tell you what," he said, grabbing his worn jacket from the hook by the door. "How about I walk you both to school? We can stop by the convenience store and grab you some supplies, Madison." "You don't have to," Madison started to protest. "I want to," Ethan cut in kindly. "Everyone needs a fresh notebook and some sharp pencils for school, right?" Outside, the morning air was crisp and clean. Lily skipped ahead, her backpack bouncing with each step, occasionally turning to wave at them or point out something interesting. A funny-shaped cloud, a cat in a window, a blooming flower pushing through a crack in the sidewalk. Madison walked beside Ethan, her steps becoming lighter with each block they covered. She watched Lily with a mixture of wonder and longing, as if she couldn't quite believe this was real. "Thank you," she said quietly, not looking at Ethan. "For everything." "You don't need to thank me," Ethan replied. "Just promise me one thing." Madison tensed slightly but nodded. "Promise me you'll talk to me before you ever think about." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought of finding her on those train tracks again. "I promise," she whispered, and Ethan could hear the sincerity in her voice. They stopped at the small convenience store on the corner. While Lily examined the candy display with intense concentration, Ethan helped Madison pick out some basic school supplies: notebooks, pencils, erasers, and a simple calculator. He added a pack of colorful hair ties when he saw her eyeing them, and her grateful smile made the extra expense worth it. As they approached the schools, the elementary school on one side of the street, the high school on the other, Lily turned to give Madison a fierce hug. "See you after school, big sister," she called out cheerfully before running to join her friends by the playground. Madison stood still for a moment, watching Lily go, a shy smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The morning sun caught her hair, and for a second, Ethan could see past the hurt and fear to the bright, beautiful person. She could become the person she deserved to be. "Have a good day," he told her warmly. "I'll be here to pick you both up at 3. Madison nodded, clutching her new supplies to her chest. As she crossed the street toward the high school, she looked back once and waved, then disappeared into the stream of students flowing through the front doors. Ethan stood there, watching both his girls go their separate ways, knowing his life had just changed forever. The weight of this new responsibility settled on his shoulders, but unlike other burdens he'd carried, this one felt right. It felt like hope. The kitchen was tiny, barely big enough for one person, let alone 3. Yet somehow, they made it work. Ethan stood at the stove, stirring a pot of spaghetti while Madison and Lily crowded around him, giggling as they tried to help. "Can I stir?" Lily bounced on her tiptoes, her pigtails swaying with excitement. "Careful, it's hot," Ethan warned, but he couldn't hide his smile as he lifted her up to reach the pot. Madison steadied Lily's other side, her usual guardedness melting away. "Like this, Lily." Madison guided the younger girl's hand on the wooden spoon. "Not too fast, or it'll splash." The sauce bubbled cheerfully in another pan, filling their small apartment with the warm scent of tomatoes and herbs. It wasn't fancy, just simple ingredients Ethan had in the pantry, but the atmosphere made it feel like a feast. "I've never cooked before," Madison admitted quietly, watching Ethan chop fresh basil. "In the foster homes, we usually just had frozen dinners." Ethan's heart squeezed. "Well, you're doing great. Here, want to learn how to tell when pasta's ready?" Madison nodded eagerly. He showed her how to fish out a strand of spaghetti and toss it against the wall. "If it sticks, it's done." Lily squealed with delight when the pasta stuck perfectly. "Magic? Science," Madison corrected with a grin, then looked surprised at her own enthusiasm. They set the small folding table together, using mismatched plates and cups. Ethan noticed how Madison carefully arranged everything, making sure Lily's favorite purple cup was at her spot. These little gestures of caring weren't lost on him. During dinner, Lily chatted about her day at school, waving her fork expressively. "And then in art class, we made butterflies with tissue paper. Madison, will you help me make more? You can hang them in your room?" A shadow of emotion crossed Madison's face, hope mixed with uncertainty. She glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd like that," she said softly. After they cleared the dishes, Madison noticed Lily pulling out her math homework. Without prompting, she sat down beside the younger girl. "Need help?" she offered. "Yes, please. I hate fractions," Lily declared dramatically, flopping her head on the table. Ethan dried dishes slowly, watching the scene unfold. Madison patiently explained the problems, breaking them down into simple steps. She had a natural way with Lily, firm but gentle, celebrating each small victory. "See, 3/4 is the same as 6/8. You just have to double both numbers." "Oh, I get it now." Lily's face lit up with understanding. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced since before his wife passed away. The apartment had always felt too quiet, too empty, even with Lily's vibrant presence. But now, watching the girls work together, hearing their mingled laughter, the space felt right, complete. Madison caught him looking and ducked her head, but not before he saw her small, pleased smile. She belonged here, he realized. Not in some cold foster home or with a mother who had thrown her away. Here, where she could both give and receive love freely. When homework was done, they played a few rounds of Go Fish with a worn deck of cards. Lily insisted on sitting in Madison's lap, and the teenager's initial stiffness gradually relaxed into natural affection. "Got any threes?" Lily asked, her cards held backwards so everyone could see them. "Go Fish," Madison laughed, gently turning the cards around. You're showing us all your cards, silly. Oops, Lily giggled, not really caring about the game so much as the company. As the evening wound down, Ethan helped Lily get ready for bed. Madison hovered in the doorway, watching their bedtime routine with wistful eyes. Story time, Lily announced, patting the bed beside her. Madison, you too! Madison hesitated until Ethan smiled warmly. There's always room for one more. She perched on the edge of the bed as Ethan read from Lily's favorite book about a lonely dragon who found a family. His voice rose and fell with the story, adding different voices for each character. By the end, both girls were spellbound. Good night, sweetheart. Ethan kissed Lily's forehead. Then, following his heart, he gently touched Madison's shoulder. Sleep well, Madison. After making sure both girls were settled, Ethan stepped out onto the small balcony. The night air was cool and clean, stars twinkling above the city lights. He leaned against the railing, overwhelmed by the events of the past 2 days. Just yesterday, he'd been a struggling single dad, doing his best but always feeling like he was falling short. Now, somehow, he had 2 girls to care for. It should have felt overwhelming, impossible even. Instead, it felt right. Looking up at the vast sky, Ethan whispered a quiet prayer. Thank you, he breathed, his voice catching. Thank you for bringing her to us, for giving us all a second chance. Inside, he could hear Lily's muffled giggles and Madison's gentle shushing. The sounds of home, of family, of hope. Sunlight streamed through the diner's smudged windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Ethan wiped down tables during the mid-morning lull, his mind wandering to the homework he needed to help Lily with later. Madison sat in her usual corner booth, textbook open as she caught up on missed schoolwork. The bell above the door chimed. Ethan looked up, his cleaning rag freezing mid-swipe. A woman stood in the entrance, her designer outfit stark against the diner's faded decor. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled into an elegant twist, and her leather handbag probably cost more than his monthly rent. Grace Whitmore. She hadn't changed much in 20 years, still carried herself like she owned whatever room she entered. Her sharp eyes scanned the diner with barely concealed distaste before landing on him. Ethan Cole. Her voice cut through the quiet murmur of the few regular customers. I should have known you'd be involved in this situation. From the corner booth, Madison's pencil clattered to the floor. The sound made Grace turn, and Ethan watched the girl shrink into herself, shoulders hunching as if trying to disappear. What are you doing here, Grace? Ethan kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. He stepped between Grace and Madison's line of sight, a protective instinct he couldn't suppress. Don't play innocent. Grace's heels clicked against the floor as she approached. You're harboring my daughter. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Your daughter? Ethan's hands clenched around his cleaning rag. The one you abandoned to foster care? Grace's perfectly painted lips tightened. You have no right to judge my choices. You don't know anything about my circumstances. I know enough. Ethan glanced back at Madison, who hadn't moved from her spot. Her face had gone pale, her hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the table. I know she needed help, and no one was there for her. Oh, please. Grace waved a manicured hand dismissively. Don't try to play hero, Ethan. You're still that same boy from the wrong side of the tracks, trying to prove something to people who are far above your station. The old wound stung, but Ethan stood his ground. This isn't about me, Grace. This is about Madison. Exactly. Grace's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. She is my daughter, my flesh and blood. What gives you the right to step in and act like some kind of savior? The right? Ethan's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. I earned that right when I pulled her off those train tracks. Where were you then, Grace? Where were you when she needed someone, anyone, to show her she mattered? Grace's face flickered, a crack appearing in her polished veneer. Train tracks? What are you talking about? Ask your daughter. Ethan stepped aside, revealing Madison, who now stood shakily beside the booth. Ask her why she was standing there that night, waiting for the train. Grace's eyes widened as she took in Madison's defensive posture, the fear evident in every line of her body. For a moment, something like pain crossed her features. Madison, Grace said, softer now. Come home. Whatever this is, we can sort it out properly, with the right people. Madison shook her head, taking a step backward. "There is no home with you," she whispered. "There never was." "Don't be dramatic." Grace's tone sharpened again. "You're causing a scene. This isn't like you." "You don't know what I'm like," Madison's voice cracked. "You never tried to find out." Other customers were watching now, their conversations dying down to worried whispers. Ethan moved closer to Madison, offering silent support. "This is ridiculous." Grace's compose cracked further, her voice rising. "Some diner worker who can barely support himself." Madison flinched at the venom in Grace's voice, but then straightened her spine. "Ethan saved my life," she said quietly. "That's more than you ever did." Grace's face flushed red. She took 2 quick steps toward Madison, but Ethan moved between them again. "That's enough," he said firmly. "You're upsetting her. Please leave." "How dare you tell me to leave?" Grace's eyes flashed dangerously. "You have no authority here. None at all." "Ma'am." Joe, the diner's owner, appeared from the kitchen. "I'm going to have to ask you to go. You're disturbing my customers." Grace looked around, suddenly aware of the audience they'd drawn. Her jaw clenched as she took a step back, smoothing her jacket with trembling hands. "This isn't over," she said, her voice cold as ice. "She belongs with me." Her eyes fixed on Madison. "I'll be back. Count on it." With that, she turned and strode out of the diner, the bell chiming violently in her wake. The sound had barely faded when Madison's legs gave out. Ethan caught her before she could fall, feeling her whole body shaking. "I've got you," he murmured as she clung to his shirt. "I've got you, Madison. You're safe." But the trembling didn't stop, and Ethan knew that Grace's threat would hang over them like a storm cloud, waiting to break. The Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear, painting the modest apartment complex in shades of gold. Ethan adjusted his worn but freshly pressed tie in the mirror, watching Madison fidget with the hem of her borrowed dress. It was one of his late wife's old sundresses that he'd kept in a box under his bed. Simple cotton with tiny blue flowers that seemed to suit Madison perfectly. "Does it look okay?" Madison whispered, smoothing the fabric for the 10th time. Her eyes darted nervously to the mirror, then away again. "You look beautiful," Ethan assured her, his heart aching at her uncertainty. In the background, Lily twirled in her favorite Sunday dress, the pink skirt floating around her like cotton candy. "I've never been to church before," Madison admitted quietly. "What if they don't like me?" Ethan knelt down beside her, just as he often did with Lily when she needed reassurance. "The people at First Community are like family to us. They helped me raise Lily after." He paused, swallowing hard. "After her mom passed. They'll love you just as much." The drive to church was short but peaceful, with Lily chattering about the Sunday school crafts she hoped they'd make. Madison sat silently in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. As they pulled into the parking lot, Ethan noticed her shoulders tense at the sight of people milling about on the church steps. "We can sit in the back if you want," he offered gently. Madison nodded gratefully, and they made their way inside. The familiar scent of coffee and old hymnals wrapped around them as they entered the sanctuary. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. "Ethan Cole," Mrs. Martinez, a grandmother figure to half the congregation, bustled over immediately, her warm brown eyes crinkled with delight as she spotted Madison. "And who is this lovely young lady?" Before Madison could shrink away, Lily proudly announced, "This is my big sister Madison. Daddy saved her." Mrs. Martinez's expression softened with understanding. Without hesitation, she enveloped Madison in a gentle hug. "Welcome to our church family, sweetheart. We're so glad you're here." Madison stood frozen for a moment before slowly, cautiously returning the embrace. Ethan watched as something in her face shifted, like ice beginning to thaw. Throughout the service, more church members stopped by their pew to introduce themselves. Each greeting was genuine, each smile warm. Pastor Mike, with his salt and pepper beard and kind eyes, made a special point to welcome Madison during the greeting time. "There's always room for one more in God's house," he said, squeezing her shoulder gently. During worship, Ethan noticed Madison watching intently as the congregation sang. Her eyes wandered over the families around them, parents with arms around their children, elderly couples holding hands, teenagers swaying to the music. The longing on her face was painful to witness. Lily, perceptive as always, reached across Ethan to grab Madison's hand. You can share my hymnal, she offered, scooting closer until they were all squeezed together on the pew. The sermon that morning was about chosen family, about Ruth's dedication to Naomi, about Jesus' love for his disciples. Ethan felt each word resonate in his chest like a bell. Beside him, Madison listened with rapt attention, occasionally wiping at her eyes when she thought no one was looking. During the fellowship hour after service, the church ladies surrounded Madison with genuine interest and plates of homemade cookies. Mrs. Martinez insisted on getting her phone number so she could check in on her new granddaughter. The youth group leader invited her to their Wednesday night meetings. Even old Mr. Peterson, who rarely spoke to anyone, offered her one of the candies he always kept in his pocket. The youth group is making care packages for foster kids next week. Sarah, a friendly teenager with bright blue hair, told Madison. You should totally come help. We could use your insight. For the first time since Ethan had met her, Madison's smile reached her eyes. Maybe I will, she replied softly. As the final hymn began to play, the congregation rose to their feet. Madison stood between Ethan and Lily, their shoulders touching. The organ's rich tones filled the sanctuary as they sang about amazing grace and sweet hours of prayer. Ethan watched as tears began to roll down Madison's cheeks. But these weren't the tears of despair he'd seen at the train tracks. These were different. They sparkled in the stained glass light like tiny prisms. Lily, noticing her sister's emotion, slipped her small hand into Madison's and squeezed tight. The sight made Ethan's heart swell, with equal parts pride and protective instinct. This was what family looked like, not defined by blood or birth certificates, but by love freely given and received. Madison wasn't just some troubled teen he'd rescued anymore. She was becoming as much his daughter as Lily, and he would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. The music swelled around them. Hundreds of voices joined in harmony. Madison stood a little straighter, her voice gaining strength as she joined in the familiar words. Lily beamed up at her, still holding her hand, while Ethan watched them both with eyes that burned with unshed tears. It was a perfect moment, one of those rare instances where everything felt right with the world. Madison belonged here, surrounded by love and acceptance. She belonged with them, in this makeshift family that somehow fit together perfectly despite its broken pieces. The sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows painted their faces in jewel tones, ruby, sapphire, and gold. For that brief, shining moment, they were just a family at church, singing praises together on a Sunday morning. 3 hearts beating in sync, 3 voices raised in song, 3 souls bound together by something stronger than circumstance. The apartment stairwell creaked under Ethan's tired feet as he climbed to the 3rd floor. His muscles ached from a long day of work, but excitement bubbled in his chest. Through the thin walls, he could hear Lily's laughter mixing with Madison's voice, a sound that had become wonderfully familiar over the past weeks. He fumbled with his keys, the metal clinking against the lock. Before he could turn it, the door flew open. Lily launched herself at him, her small arms wrapping around his waist. "Daddy, you're late today." She peered up at him with curious brown eyes. Madison stood in the kitchen doorway, wooden spoon in hand, wearing one of his old aprons. The smell of pasta sauce filled the small apartment. "We were getting worried," she said, trying to sound casual, but Ethan caught the hint of genuine concern in her voice. "I have news," he announced, setting down his worn leather work bag. "Good news." Lily bounced on her toes. "What is it? What is it?" Madison stepped closer, wiping her hands on the apron. Her eyes held a guarded hope, the kind that comes from learning to expect disappointment. "Remember Mr. Peterson from church?" Ethan asked, shrugging off his jacket. "The one with the furniture store? Well, he needs help in his workshop. He offered me part-time work doing carpentry weekday afternoons and some Saturdays." "But what about the diner?" Madison asked, her forehead creasing with worry. "I'll keep my morning shifts there," Ethan explained, settling onto their threadbare couch. "The carpentry pays better, and Mr. Peterson's willing to be flexible with hours. This means—" He paused, looking at both girls. "This means we'll have a bit more breathing room." Lily clapped her hands. "Can we get ice cream sometimes?" "Sometimes," Ethan chuckled. "But more importantly, we can start saving. Maybe even look for a bigger place eventually." Madison's eyes widened. "You mean you want me to stay? Long term?" The vulnerability in her voice made Ethan's heart ache. "Of course I do. Both of you girls are my priority now. Madison turned quickly back to the kitchen, but not before Ethan caught the shimmer of tears in her eyes. "Dinner's almost ready," she called over her shoulder. "And I have a surprise, too." While Lily set the table with their mismatched plates, Madison pulled something from the back of the refrigerator. It was a small, slightly lopsided chocolate cake with congratulations written in wobbly white frosting. "I had a feeling today would be special," Madison explained, blushing. "Mrs. Rodriguez from next door helped me bake it. I've never really baked before, so it might not be perfect." "It's beautiful," Ethan said firmly, and Lily nodded enthusiastically. Over plates of spaghetti and meatballs, Madison began to open up more than she ever had before. "I've been thinking," she said, twirling pasta around her fork. If I stay here, maybe I could start thinking about college?" The guidance counselor at school said my grades are good enough for scholarships. "Of course you can think about college," Ethan encouraged. "You're smart and hardworking. Sky's the limit." "I want to study too," Lily declared, sauce smeared across her chin. "Can I go to college with Madison?" Madison laughed, a free, genuine sound that filled the small apartment with warmth. "You've got a few years to go first, Squirt." She reached over to wipe Lily's chin with a napkin, the gesture so natural it made Ethan's chest tighten with emotion. After dinner, they shared the cake, which was actually quite delicious despite its appearance. Madison told them about her dream of becoming a social worker. "I want to help other kids," she said softly. "Kids like me. Show them there's hope." "You will," Ethan assured her. "And we'll be right here supporting you." Madison's eyes met his, filled with tentative hope. "Sometimes," she hesitated, then pushed on. "Sometimes I imagine calling you Dad. Is that weird?" "I mean, I know it's too soon and I don't want to pressure you or anything." "It's not weird at all," Ethan said gently. "Whenever you're ready, if that's what you want, I'd be honored." "Me too," Lily piped up. "I always wanted a big sister." Madison's face lit up with joy, and she hugged Lily tight. Then, surprising herself and Ethan, she stood and wrapped her arms around him too. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Good night, Dad." She tested the word carefully, then hurried to her makeshift bed on the couch, her cheeks pink but her smile radiant. Ethan's heart soared as he watched her settle in for the night. After tucking Lily in, he headed to the kitchen to clean up. That's when he noticed the envelope that had been slipped under the front door. Picking it up, his smile faded as he read the return address. Harrison, Associates, Attorneys at Law. Below that, in smaller text, representing Grace Whitmore. The kitchen light buzzed softly overhead as Ethan sat at the worn table, the crisp legal document trembling in his weathered hands. Madison stood frozen by the sink, dish towel clutched against her chest, her face pale with dread. The cheerful moment from minutes ago had evaporated, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to steal the air from the room. "What?" Madison's voice cracked. "What does it say?" Ethan read the words again, each line hitting him like a physical blow. The formal language felt cold and threatening. "Notice of emergency custody hearing. Immediate return of minor. Unlawful harboring." "Your mother," Ethan managed, his throat tight. "She's filing for full custody. She's saying I'm keeping you here illegally." Madison's knees buckled, and she gripped the counter to steady herself. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." Lily, who had been coloring at the other end of the table, set down her crayon and looked between them with worried eyes. "What's wrong? Why is Madison crying?" Ethan folded the paper carefully, trying to keep his hands steady for the girl's sake. "Madison's mother wants her to come live with her." "But Madison lives with us now," Lily said firmly, as if that settled everything. "She's my sister." Madison slid down to sit on the kitchen floor, tears streaming down her face. "I can't go back there." "Please, Ethan, don't let her take me. She doesn't even want me. She just wants to hurt me." Ethan pushed back from the table and crossed to Madison, kneeling beside her. His knees protested, but he ignored the discomfort. "Listen to me," he said gently, taking her trembling hands in his. "I'm not giving up without a fight. You hear me?" Madison nodded weakly, but fear still gripped her features. "She has money. She has lawyers. She'll win." "Money isn't everything," Ethan said, though his own doubt gnawed at him. "We have something better, the truth and love." Lily scrambled down from her chair and joined them on the floor, wrapping her small arms around Madison. "I'll pray super hard," she declared. Every night. God listens to kids extra special. That's what Sunday school says. Despite her tears, Madison managed a wobbly smile at Lily's words. Thank you, Squirt. Ethan stood slowly, his mind racing through options. He'd need a lawyer, but his savings were practically non-existent. The new carpentry job would help, but court battles cost money he didn't have. Still, looking at Madison's tear-stained face, he knew he'd find a way. We should eat dinner, he said, trying to restore some normalcy. Madison worked hard cooking it, but Madison hugged her knees to her chest. I'm not hungry anymore. You need to eat, Ethan insisted gently. Both of you. We're stronger together, remember? Lily tugged at Madison's sleeve. Please? You made spaghetti. It's my favorite. Madison wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and let Lily pull her to her feet. They moved through the motions of serving dinner, but the usual warmth of their evening meal was missing. The pasta grew cold on their plates as they picked at it half-heartedly. What happens now? Madison finally asked, her voice small. Ethan set down his fork. There'll be a hearing. We'll tell the judge everything. About the foster home. About how your mother treated you. About these past weeks with us. Will they believe me? They'll have to, Ethan said with more confidence than he felt. You're not alone anymore. I'll be right there with you. Lily reached across the table and grabbed Madison's hand. Me too. I'll tell them you're the best big sister ever. Fresh tears spilled down Madison's cheeks, but these seemed different, touched by gratitude rather than fear. I never had anyone fight for me before. Ethan's heart ached at her words. How many times had this girl been let down by the adults who should have protected her? How many times had she faced her mother's rejection alone? He thought of Grace Whitmore's cold eyes in the diner, the way she'd looked at Madison like a possession rather than a daughter. Well, you do now, he said firmly. And we're not going anywhere. The evening crept on, heavy with worry but also determination. After dinner, they sat together on the old couch, Lily wedged between them, insisting on reading her favorite story about David and Goliath. See, she said, pointing to the pictures. Sometimes the little guy wins. When it was time for bed, Madison lingered in the living room, clearly afraid to be alone with her thoughts. Ethan understood. After tucking Lily in, he made hot chocolate. Their ritual when someone needed comfort. Try to sleep, he told Madison, pressing the warm mug into her hands. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. She nodded, clutching the mug like a lifeline. I'm sorry I'm causing so much trouble. Hey, Ethan said sharply. You're not trouble. You're family. And family stands together. After Madison finally retreated to the fold-out couch in the living room, Ethan stood in the kitchen, the legal notice burning a hole in his pocket. He took it out one more time, studying the formal letterhead, the threatening language, the signature of Grace's expensive lawyer. His fingers curled around the paper, crumpling it slightly before he caught himself. Smoothing it carefully, he tucked it back into his pocket. She's mine to protect now, he whispered to himself, a quiet promise in the darkness. The words felt right, felt true in his bones. Whatever it took, whatever sacrifice he had to make, he would not let Madison be torn away from the safety and love she'd finally found. Grace Whitmore might have money and influence, but Ethan had something stronger, a father's heart, even if not by blood, and he would fight with everything he had to keep his family together. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Ethan straightened his worn navy tie for the 10th time. The suit jacket felt tight across his shoulders. He hadn't worn it since his wife's funeral 5 years ago. Small patches of wear showed at the elbows, and one button hung loose, but it was all he had. Madison stood beside him, her fingers intertwined tightly with his. She wore a borrowed dress from their church friend, Mrs. Baker, who had helped her curl her hair and even added a ribbon. The girl looked younger somehow, more vulnerable in the pale blue fabric. Remember what we practiced, Ethan said softly, squeezing her hand. Just tell the truth. That's all anyone can ask of you. Lily bounced on her toes nearby, her small hand in Mrs. Baker's grip. Can I come too? I want to tell the judge that Madison's my sister now. Not this time, sweetheart. Ethan knelt down to hug her. You be good for Mrs. Baker, okay? We'll all have ice cream after this is done. Mrs. Baker gave him an encouraging smile. We'll be right here praying for you both. Come on, Lily. Let's go find that park we saw earlier. As they watched Lily skip away, Madison's grip on Ethan's hand tightened. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," Ethan admitted. "But we're going to face this together." The courthouse interior felt cold and imposing, with its marble floors and high ceilings. Their footsteps echoed as they followed the signs to Courtroom C. Outside the heavy wooden doors, Grace Whitmore stood with two sharp-dressed lawyers, her perfectly styled hair and designer suit, a stark contrast to Ethan's humble appearance. Grace's eyes flicked over Madison, then settled on Ethan with naked disdain. One of her lawyers stepped forward, all polished smile and calculated charm. "Mr. Cole, I trust you've reconsidered our generous offer. It would save everyone considerable trouble if you'd simply step aside now." Ethan felt Madison trembling beside him. He straightened his shoulders. "We'll let the judge decide what's best for Madison." Inside the courtroom, Grace's legal team wasted no time painting Ethan in the worst possible light. They displayed photos of his tiny apartment, emphasized his 2 minimum-wage jobs, and questioned his ability to provide proper care for a teenage girl. "Your Honor," the lead lawyer said, his voice dripping with false concern, "Mr. Cole is clearly an unstable influence. He lives paycheck to paycheck, can barely support his own daughter, and has no legal right to harbor a minor who ran away from state custody." Ethan's court-appointed lawyer did her best, but she seemed overwhelmed by the opposition's aggressive tactics. She highlighted Ethan's rescue of Madison, his steady employment history, and the positive environment he'd created for both girls. When Madison was called to speak, she stood tall despite her fear. "Ethan saved my life," she said, her voice clear, though tears threatened. "Not just at the train tracks. Every day since then. He and Lily are the only real family I've ever had." "And what of your mother?" the judge asked, gesturing to Grace. "She seems quite concerned for your welfare." Madison's composure cracked. "She threw me away. She didn't want me then, and she doesn't want me now. She just doesn't want anyone else to have me either." Grace's lawyer quickly objected, calling Madison's testimony emotionally manipulated and clearly influenced by Mr. Cole's presence. The judge called for order, then spoke in measured tones. "While I appreciate the emotional bonds that have formed, we must follow proper legal channels. Until a full hearing can be conducted, Miss Whitmore will be returned to state custody for her own protection." "No," Madison cried out. "Please, you can't." 2 court officers approached as Grace's lawyers smiled triumphantly. Madison grabbed Ethan's arm, her fingers digging in desperately. "Daddy, please, don't let them take me." The word "daddy" hit Ethan like a physical blow. He tried to hold on to her, but the officers firmly separated them. "It's temporary, Madison," he called out, his voice breaking. "I promise I'll fight for you. I won't give up." Madison's screams echoed through the courthouse as they dragged her away. "Please, I want to stay with my family. Ethan, please!" Grace watched the scene with cold satisfaction before turning on her heel and walking away, her lawyers in tow. The courtroom emptied quickly, leaving Ethan standing alone, his empty hands shaking. He stumbled outside, barely making it to the courthouse steps before his legs gave out. The morning sun felt mockingly bright as he sank down, burying his face in his hands. Madison's desperate cries still rang in his ears, mixing with memories of her laughter at breakfast just that morning, of her helping Lily with homework, of her whispered, "Good night, Dad," the evening before. His shoulders shook with silent sobs as people passed by, avoiding looking at the broken man on the steps. The suit jacket stretched tight across his back as he hunched forward, feeling as though his heart had been torn from his chest. Madison's final scream of "Daddy" echoed in his mind, a cry of desperate need from a child who had finally found love, only to have it ripped away again. The weight of his failure pressed down on him like a physical thing, threatening to crush him completely on those cold courthouse steps. The streetlights cast dim shadows through the thin curtains of their small apartment. Ethan sat on the edge of Lily's narrow bed, his large hand gently stroking her hair as she sobbed into her pillow. Her stuffed giraffe, the one Madison had fixed with careful stitches just days ago, lay forgotten at the foot of the bed. "I want Madison back, Daddy," Lily hiccuped between tears. "Why did they take her away? She belongs with us." Ethan's throat tightened. The empty bedroom across the hall seemed to mock him, the freshly washed sheets still on the bed, Madison's borrowed sweater draped over the chair, her toothbrush still in the bathroom cup next to Lily's. All the little pieces of the life they'd started building together, now frozen in time like a museum of what could have been. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. I tried so hard to keep her safe." Lily rolled over, her face streaked with tears, her brown eyes, so like her mother's, full of hurt and confusion. "But you always say we should help people who need us. Madison needs us, Daddy. She told me so." The memory of Madison being led away by court officers stabbed at his heart. Her screams still echoed in his ears, the way she'd reached for him, begging not to be taken back to the foster system. He'd stood there, helpless, watching another daughter slip through his fingers. "I know, baby. I know she does." Ethan's shoulders slumped. The weight of failure pressed down on him like a physical thing. "Remember when Mommy got sick?" Lily sat up, clutching her pillow to her chest. "You told me we had to be brave even when we were scared. That's what you said." Ethan closed his eyes against the fresh wave of grief. His wife had faced her illness with such grace, such unwavering faith. What would she think of him now? Sitting here in defeat while Madison faced another night alone, terrified and abandoned? "Madison is probably really scared right now," Lily continued, her small voice trembling. "She needs you to be brave for her, like you were brave for Mommy." The simple wisdom in his daughter's words cut through Ethan's despair. He looked around the modest room, at the drawings taped to the walls, the bookshelf filled with yard sale finds, the tiny desk where both girls had done homework together. It wasn't much, but it was home. Their home. And it felt wrong without Madison in it. "You're right, sweetheart." Ethan gathered Lily into his arms, holding her close. "I can't give up, not when Madison needs us most." Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, her tears dampening his collar. "Promise you'll get her back? Please, Daddy? I promise I'll do everything I can." Ethan's voice grew stronger with determination. "We're not going to stop fighting for her. Pinky promise?" Lily held out her tiny finger, her expression serious despite her tear-stained cheeks. Ethan linked his finger with hers, managing a small smile. "Pinky promise." It took another hour to get Lily settled enough to sleep. Ethan tucked the blankets around her, kissed her forehead, and left her nightlight glowing softly. In the hallway, he paused at Madison's empty room, his hand resting on the doorframe. The past few weeks played through his mind like a movie. Madison helping Lily with her reading, the three of them making pancakes on Sunday mornings, the sound of their laughter filling these small rooms with joy. How quickly she'd become part of their family, filling a space they hadn't even known was empty. Ethan's legs felt heavy as he walked to his own bedroom. The springs creaked as he knelt beside his bed, clasping his hands together like his mother had taught him so many years ago. Tears he'd been holding back all day began to fall freely. "Lord," he whispered into the darkness, his voice breaking, "I don't understand your plan here. That girl needs love and protection, and you led her to us. Please, please don't let this be the end of her story. Give me strength to keep fighting. Show me the way to bring her home." His shoulders shook as he wept, releasing all the fear and anger and helplessness of the day. He prayed for Madison, wherever she was tonight. Prayed she wouldn't lose hope, wouldn't give up on the family that was fighting to keep her. Most of all, he prayed for guidance, for some sign of what to do next. The tears continued to stream down his face as he poured out his heart, asking for the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the quiet of the night, his prayers rose like whispers of hope in the darkness. Madison sat cross-legged on the thin mattress of her new foster home, a lined notebook balanced on her knees. The bed springs creaked with every slight movement, and the musty smell of old carpet filled her nose. A bare light bulb hung overhead, casting harsh shadows across the cramped room she shared with two other girls. Her pen hovered over the blank page. Tears splashed onto the paper, making small ripples in the blue lines. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater, the soft purple one Ethan had washed for her that first night she stayed with them. "Dear Ethan and Lily," she wrote, her handwriting shaky but determined. "I miss you both so much it hurts. The house feels empty here, even though there are other kids around. Nobody reads bedtime stories like you do, Lily. Nobody makes breakfast with love like you do, Ethan." Madison paused, pressing the pen harder against the paper. "I keep thinking about the morning Lily braided my hair before school, and how Ethan packed extra cookies in both our lunches. I never told you this, but I saved one of those cookies. I didn't eat it because I wanted to keep something you made for me. Pretty silly, right? A quiet sob escaped her throat. From across the room, her new roommate Sarah looked up from her phone. Sarah was 13, with kind eyes and frizzy red hair. She'd been in the system longer than Madison and had shown her the ropes of the house. "You okay?" Sarah whispered, careful not to wake their youngest roommate. Madison nodded, but her trembling shoulders gave her away. She bent back over the letter. "I'm scared," she wrote. "Not just of being away from you both, but that I'll never feel that safe again. Ethan, you pulled me off those train tracks and saved my life. But it wasn't just that moment. You saved me every day after, just by being there, by caring, by showing me what a real father looks like." Sarah padded over in sock feet and sat on the edge of Madison's bed. She didn't speak, just offered silent support as Madison continued writing. "Lily, you're the little sister I always wanted. Remember when you drew that picture of all three of us? You used your special glitter crayons and wrote 'My Family' at the top. I wish I could have taken that picture with me. I hope you're still drawing. I hope you're still smiling." Madison's hand cramped, but she kept going. The words poured out of her like a river breaking through a dam. "The judge didn't listen to me in court. They all talked about me like I wasn't even there. Grace, I can't call her mom, not after everything. She stood there in her expensive clothes talking about what's best for me. But she doesn't know me. She gave that right up years ago." Sarah touched Madison's shoulder gently. "You know," she said softly, "you don't have to just accept what they decide. You're 15. You have a voice." Madison looked up, tears streaming down her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you can speak for yourself. Really speak. Not just answer their questions, but tell your story. Tell them why you need to be with Ethan and Lily." Hope flickered in Madison's chest, small but bright, like a candle in the dark. She turned back to her letter. "I'm not going to give up," she wrote with renewed determination. "Sarah just reminded me that I have a voice. Remember Pastor Mike from church? How he said God gives us strength when we need it most? I'm going to call him tomorrow. Maybe he can help me testify at the next hearing." The next morning, Madison snuck down to the kitchen before breakfast. The foster mom was still asleep, but she knew where the ancient cordless phone was kept. With shaking fingers, she dialed the church number from memory. Pastor Mike answered on the third ring. His warm voice brought fresh tears to her eyes, but she forced them back. "Pastor Mike, it's Madison. Madison Whitmore. I need your help." He listened as she explained everything. The court hearing, being taken away, her desperate need to return to Ethan and Lily. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. "Madison," he said finally, "I would be honored to help you speak your truth. We'll make sure the judge hears your heart this time." Relief flooded through her. She thanked him repeatedly, then hurried back upstairs before anyone noticed she was gone. Sarah was awake, waiting with a supportive smile. Madison pulled out her letter one last time. "I'm going to fight for us," she wrote. "Pastor Mike is going to help me tell the judge everything. How you saved me. How you showed me what real love is. How Lily taught me to trust again. They have to listen this time. They have to understand that sometimes family isn't about blood or money or fancy houses. Sometimes it's about who pulls you off the train tracks, who makes you feel safe, who loves you even when you're broken." She looked at the final page, making sure she hadn't left anything unsaid. "I love you both so much. Please don't give up on me. I'm coming home somehow." Madison slipped the pages into an envelope she'd saved from her backpack. With careful letters, she wrote Ethan's address on the front, the address that had become home in such a short time. At the bottom of the envelope, she added one final message. "You saved me once. Now I'll save us." Sarah helped her sneak the letter into the outgoing mail pile on the kitchen counter. As they walked back upstairs, Madison felt something she hadn't since being taken away. Strength. Real strength, not just the desperate kind that had driven her to the train tracks that night. The morning sun streamed through the dusty window, painting stripes across her bed. Madison touched the envelope one last time before leaving it behind. Inside those pages was her heart, her fear, her love, but most importantly, her promise to fight. She would make them listen. She would find her way back home. Sarah squeezed her hand. "You've got this," she whispered. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is speak up for ourselves. Madison nodded, watching the envelope that held her words, her hope, her determination. She might be just one voice, but with Pastor Mike's help and the truth in her heart, maybe that voice would be enough. Maybe this time, they would hear her. The evening rush at the diner had slowed to a trickle when Mrs. Thompson bustled through the door, waving an envelope. "Ethan, this came for you!" Her usually cheerful face was flushed with excitement. Ethan wiped his hands on his apron, recognizing Madison's neat handwriting immediately. His heart skipped a beat. "Pastor Samuel's in his usual booth. Would you mind if I—" Go! Mrs. Thompson shooed him away, already reaching for his abandoned dish towel. "I'll cover for you." The pastor looked up from his coffee and Bible study notes as Ethan slid into the booth. "What do you have there, son?" "It's from Madison." Ethan's fingers trembled as he carefully opened the envelope. The paper inside was covered in Madison's familiar script, some words smudged with what looked like teardrops. "Dear Ethan and Lily," he began reading aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "I miss you both so much it hurts. The foster home is clean and they feed us okay, but it's not home. It's not you." Pastor Samuel reached across the table, laying his weathered hand on Ethan's arm as he continued reading. "Every night I think about our dinners together. How Lily would tell silly jokes, and how you always saved the biggest pancake for me even though I know you were hungry too. I remember how you never got mad when I was scared to talk, just waited until I was ready." Ethan had to pause, clearing his throat. The pastor squeezed his arm gently. "But I'm not scared anymore," Madison's letter continued. "You taught me that love means standing up for what's right. I'm going to tell everyone the truth at the hearing, about Mom abandoning me, about the bad foster homes, about how you and Lily gave me the only real family I've ever known." Two elderly regulars at the counter turned to listen, their coffee cups forgotten. Mrs. Thompson had stopped wiping tables, her dish rag hanging limp in her hand. "I know Mom has important friends and fancy lawyers, but you have something better. You have love. Real love. The kind that saves people on train tracks and makes extra pancakes and doesn't give up." The diner had grown completely silent. Even the cook had stepped out from the kitchen, spatula in hand. "Remember when you told me that sometimes God puts people in our path for a reason? I think that's why I was on those tracks that night. Not to end something, but to find my real family. You saved my life twice, once from the train and once by showing me what it means to be loved." Pastor Samuel pulled out a handkerchief and dabbed at his eyes. Mrs. Thompson was openly crying now, and several customers were sniffling. "So please don't give up, Ethan. I'm going to fight for us, just like you fought for me. Tell Lily I love her, and I'm keeping my promise to be the best big sister ever. Love, Madison." Ethan folded the letter carefully, his hands still shaking. The diner erupted in murmurs and exclamations. "That child belongs with you, Ethan Cole," Mrs. Thompson declared firmly. "And I'm telling that to any judge who'll listen. Count me in too," called out Mr. Jenkins from the counter. "I've watched you work 2 jobs for years, never complaining, always helping others despite barely getting by yourself." Pastor Samuel's eyes were bright with purpose. "The congregation needs to hear this, Ethan. God's hand is clearly at work here." The next few days passed in a whirlwind. Word spread through the small town like wildfire. People Ethan barely knew stopped him on the street to offer support. Teachers from Lily's school wrote glowing letters about how Madison had blossomed during her brief time there. The hardware store owner, where Ethan occasionally did carpentry work, prepared a statement about his work ethic and character. Even Grace Whitmore couldn't ignore the groundswell of support. She was spotted sitting alone in her car outside the diner one afternoon, watching through the window as Ethan worked. Her perfectly composed face showed the first cracks of doubt. When Wednesday evening service came around, Pastor Samuel insisted Ethan address the congregation. He stood at the pulpit, Madison's letter tucked safely in his pocket, looking out at the faces of his neighbors, rich and poor, young and old, all united in support of his cause. "I'm not a man of many words," Ethan began haltingly. "I've spent most of my life just trying to keep my head above water, especially after losing my wife. But when I saw Madison on those tracks," his voice caught, "I didn't think. I just ran, because that's what you do for family." The church was silent, hanging on his every word, and that's what Madison became family. Not because of papers or blood, but because love doesn't care about those things. Love just sees a heart that needs healing and opens its arms wide. Several people nodded, dabbing at their eyes. Maybe I don't have much to offer. My apartment is small, my furniture is secondhand, and sometimes dinner is just pancakes. But I can give her what she needs most: unconditional love, stability, and a sister who prays for her every night. Ethan pulled out Madison's letter, holding it like a precious thing. Madison wrote that I saved her life twice, but the truth is, she and Lily saved mine. They showed me that being a father isn't about what you can buy. It's about what you're willing to give of yourself. His voice broke as he gripped the edges of the pulpit. She is my family. The congregation rose as one, their applause thundering through the small church. Mrs. Thompson was openly weeping, and Pastor Samuel beamed with pride. In that moment, surrounded by the love and support of his community, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy, its wooden benches packed tight with familiar faces from church, the diner, and around town. Morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his borrowed suit feeling stiff and uncomfortable. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap to hide their trembling. Across the aisle, Grace Whitmore sat ramrod straight in an expensive navy dress suit, her face a mask of cool composure. But Ethan noticed how she kept smoothing her skirt with manicured fingers, a nervous habit that betrayed her uncertainty. When Madison was called to the stand, the room fell silent. She looked so young in her simple blue dress, her shoulders tense as she walked to the witness box. Her eyes found Ethan's, and he gave her a small, encouraging nod. The court clerk swore her in, and Madison's "I do" came out barely above a whisper. "Miss Whitmore," the judge said kindly, "please tell the court about your experiences these past few months." Madison took a deep breath. Her fingers twisted in her lap as she began to speak, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Before I met Mr. Cole, before Ethan saved my life, I felt completely alone. My foster parents." She paused, swallowing hard. "They would lock the kitchen at night. Sometimes I wouldn't eat for days. They called me worthless, said no one would ever want me." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the courtroom. Grace's perfectly composed expression cracked slightly. "The night Ethan found me, I was ready to give up," Madison continued, tears welling in her eyes. "I was standing on those train tracks, and I just wanted everything to stop hurting. But then he came running, and he pulled me away just in time. He didn't even know me, but he risked his life to save mine." Ethan blinked back his own tears, remembering that desperate moment when he'd seen her small figure in the gathering dark. "And then?" the judge prompted gently. "He took me to get something to eat. He listened to me. Nobody had ever just listened before." Madison's voice grew stronger. "And when he brought me home, his daughter Lily, she just accepted me, just like that. She started calling me her big sister from the very first day." Madison looked directly at Grace now, her chin lifting slightly. "I know I have a mother, but she made it clear years ago that she didn't want me, that I would embarrass her, that I wasn't good enough for her world." Her voice cracked. "But Ethan and Lily, they're poor, but their home is full of love. They made room for me at their table. They gave me the only real family I've ever known." Grace's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the tears now rolling down her cheeks. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her shoulders beginning to shake. "Your Honor," Grace suddenly burst out, rising from her seat. Her lawyer tried to stop her, but she shook him off. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge considered for a moment, then nodded. "Approach the bench, Mrs. Whitmore." Grace walked forward on trembling legs, her designer heels clicking against the floor. She stopped before the bench, then turned to face Madison. Gone was the cold, controlling woman who had threatened Ethan at the diner. In her place stood someone broken and human. "Madison," she said, her voice thick with tears, "I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong." She pressed her hands together as if in prayer. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was young and scared. My family's reputation meant everything to me. I convinced myself that giving you up was the right thing to do, that you'd have a better life." She shook her head. "But I was just being selfish. And when you tried to find me years later, I rejected you again because I couldn't face my own shame." The courtroom was absolutely silent now. Even the usual shuffling and coughing had ceased. "I've watched you these past weeks," Grace continued. "I've seen how you've blossomed with Ethan and Lily. I've seen the love they give you, the love I should have given you." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I was wrong to try to take Madison away from them. They're the family she deserves, the family I failed to be. Madison was crying openly now, but there was relief in her tears. Ethan wanted nothing more than to go to her, to protect her from this moment of raw emotion laid bare before so many witnesses. But he stayed in his seat, watching as years of pain and rejection began to heal through truth. The judge removed his glasses, studying both Grace and Madison carefully. "Miss Whitmore, is it your wish to remain with Mr. Cole?" "Yes, Your Honor," Madison said firmly. "More than anything. And Mr. Cole, you are prepared to take on legal guardianship of Madison, understanding all the responsibilities that entails?" Ethan stood, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. "Yes, Your Honor. She's already my daughter in every way that matters." The judge nodded slowly, then replaced his glasses. "Having heard all testimony, and considering the best interests of the minor child, I hereby grant full legal guardianship of Madison Whitmore to Ethan Cole." He paused, looking at Grace. "Mrs. Whitmore, given your honest testimony today and apparent desire to make amends, I will grant supervised visitation rights, to be arranged through the court and contingent on Madison's wishes." A wave of relief swept through the courtroom. Madison let out a sob of joy, and Ethan felt tears rolling down his own cheeks. From the back of the room came the sound of Lily's clear voice. "Daddy, we won." The judge smiled slightly and banged his gavel. "Court is adjourned." Madison flew from the witness stand straight into Ethan's arms. He held her tight, feeling her tears soak into his jacket. "It's over," he whispered. "You're home for good now." The key turned in the lock, and the apartment door swung open. Madison stepped inside, her fingers intertwined with Ethan's on one side and Lily's on the other. She paused in the doorway, taking in the sight before her. A colorful banner hung from the balcony doorway, its hand-painted letters spelling out, "Welcome Home Madison," in bright blues and yellows. The familiar scent of home, a mixture of fresh laundry and the vanilla air freshener Lily loved, wrapped around her like a warm blanket. "Look at all the food!" Lily squealed, breaking free and running to the kitchen. The refrigerator door stood slightly ajar, packed with casserole dishes, Tupperware containers, and foil-wrapped meals. Mrs. Thompson's signature lasagna sat front and center, a pink Post-it note with hearts drawn on it stuck to the top. Madison's eyes welled up with tears. She'd never seen so much food in one place meant just for her family. Her family. The words felt strange and wonderful in her mind. Her throat tightened as she spotted more signs of the community's love scattered throughout the small apartment. A fresh bouquet of daisies brightened the coffee table, and new throw pillows decorated the worn couch. Someone had even hung curtains, soft blue ones that matched the welcome banner. "They did all this while we were at court," Ethan explained softly, squeezing her shoulder. "Mrs. Thompson organized everything. The whole neighborhood wanted to make sure you felt welcomed home properly." Madison's legs gave way, and she sank onto the couch, tears flowing freely now. Lily rushed over, practically launching herself into Madison's lap, her small arms wrapped tight around Madison's neck. "Don't cry, big sister. This is happy." Lily's voice wobbled with emotion despite her own words. "You're home forever now. The judge said so." Madison hugged Lily fiercely, burying her face in her little sister's hair. I know, she managed between sobs. "I'm just so happy. I never thought I'd have this, a real home, a real family." Ethan moved to the kitchen, giving the girls their moment while he began pulling out ingredients for dinner. The familiar routine of cooking helped steady his own overwhelming emotions. He could hear Lily chattering away, showing Madison all the little touches their neighbors had added. New photo frames waiting to be filled, fresh bed linens, even a small desk for homework by the window. "Let me help," Madison said after a while, wiping her eyes and joining Ethan in the kitchen. She reached for plates in the cabinet, her designated job since those first days she'd stayed with them. "The fancy ones," Lily insisted, pointing to the china plates Mrs. Thompson had insisted on bringing over. "It's a special day." Madison carefully set 3 places at their small table, arranging the silverware just so. Each movement felt precious now, weighted with permanence. This wasn't temporary anymore. This was her home, her table, her family. A knock at the door made them all pause. Ethan opened it to find Grace standing there, looking smaller somehow without her usual polish and pride. She held a gift bag in her hands, shifting uncomfortably. I won't stay long, she said softly. I wanted to. She looked past Ethan to where Madison stood frozen by the table. Madison, I know I have so much to make up for. So many years I can never get back. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try. Slowly. On your terms. Madison's hand found Lily's instinctively, drawing strength from her sister's presence. I'd like that, she whispered. Maybe we could get coffee sometimes, just to talk. Grace's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, setting the gift bag just inside the door. I'd love that. Thank you. She glanced at Ethan. Thank you for loving her when I couldn't. For showing me what real parenting looks like. After Grace left, the three of them sat down to dinner together. The china plates gleamed under the kitchen light, filled with simple spaghetti and meatballs. Lily said grace, her small voice full of gratitude for making Madison my real sister forever and ever. Later that night, after dishes were done and pajamas were on, Ethan made his usual rounds. He tucked Lily in first, kissing her forehead and listening to her sleepy prayers. Then he moved to what was now officially Madison's room, no longer just the spare space she was borrowing. Madison sat on her bed, running her hands over the new quilt, another gift from their neighbors. Her eyes were still red from crying, but her smile was radiant. Thank you, she whispered as Ethan sat on the edge of her bed. For everything. For saving my life that night. For fighting for me. For, her voice caught, for being the dad I always wished for. Ethan's heart swelled. He pulled her into a gentle hug, remembering how she'd flinched from touch those first few days. Now she melted into the embrace, trusting and secure. Good night, Dad. Madison whispered against his shoulder. The words hit Ethan like a physical force. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he held his daughter close. All the fear, all the uncertainty, all the battles had led to this moment. God had brought this broken, beautiful girl into his life for a reason, had trusted him to be her father. He kissed the top of her head, voice rough with emotion. Good night, sweetheart. I love you. I love you too, Madison replied. And the simple truth of those words filled the whole apartment with peace. The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting warm squares of light across Ethan's small kitchen table. The modest space felt different today, fuller, brighter somehow. Madison sat between Ethan and Grace, her dark hair neatly braided, wearing the new blue dress her mother had brought her last week. Lily, perched on her booster seat across from them, swung her legs back and forth as she carefully arranged her peas into a smiley face. Would anyone like more chicken? Ethan asked, gesturing to the golden brown roast in the center of the table. The meal was simple but lovingly prepared. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green peas, and fresh rolls from the bakery down the street. Yes, please, Lily chirped, holding out her plate. You make the best chicken ever, Daddy. Grace watched as Ethan served her daughter. Both her daughters, she corrected herself mentally. The thought no longer stung as it once had. Instead, it filled her with a quiet gratitude. She observed how naturally Madison leaned toward Ethan when she laughed, how her eyes sparkled with contentment, something Grace had never seen before in all their brief, tense encounters over the years. The potatoes are really good, Grace offered, her voice still carrying a trace of awkwardness. She was trying, though. Every Sunday dinner, she felt a little more at ease in this humble apartment that held more love than her massive empty house ever had. Madison beamed at the compliment. I helped make them. Dad taught me his secret ingredient. She caught herself using the word dad and glanced nervously at Grace, but her mother just smiled encouragingly. And what's the secret ingredient? Grace asked, genuinely curious. Can't tell, Lily announced before anyone could respond. It's a Cole family secret now. She giggled, covering her mouth with both hands. The tension that might have existed in that moment dissolved into laughter. Even Grace joined in, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth in a gesture that reminded Madison of herself. Speaking of secrets, Ethan said, reaching for another roll. Madison got her math test back on Friday. Would you like to share the news? His eyes twinkled with pride. Madison ducked her head, but she couldn't hide her smile. I got an A+, she said softly. First one ever in math. That's wonderful, Grace exclaimed, and the genuine joy in her voice made Madison sit up straighter. We should celebrate. Perhaps we could all go out for ice cream after dinner? Can we, Dad? Lily bounced in her seat, peas forgotten. Please? I think that's a great idea. Ethan nodded, watching the happiness bloom across Madison's face. These moments still amazed him. How naturally they had all fallen into this new rhythm of family. The conversation flowed easily after that. Grace shared stories from her recent charity work at the local women's shelter, something she'd started after the court hearings, inspired by her daughter's courage. Lily entertained them with a detailed account of her latest art project at school. Madison and Ethan exchanged knowing looks as she described using every color in her crayon box. In the middle of Lily's story, a familiar sound cut through the chatter, the long, low whistle of the 4:15 train. Madison's fork paused halfway to her mouth, her body tensing slightly. Ethan's hand moved instinctively toward her. But before he could reach her, she relaxed, a soft smile spreading across her face. You know, Madison said, setting down her fork, I used to hate that sound. But now, she looked around the table, at Ethan's steady presence, at Lily's innocent joy, at Grace's attentive face, and continued, Now it reminds me of the night everything changed, the night Dad saved me. Grace's eyes glistened with tears. She quickly blinked away. He saved all of us, really, she said quietly, meeting Ethan's gaze with sincere gratitude. Group hug, Lily declared, already scrambling down from her booster seat. She threw her arms around Madison first, then tried to encompass everyone at once, her small arms stretching as wide as they could go. The adults laughed but obliged, awkwardly leaning in across the corner of the table. Grace's expensive perfume mingled with the homey sense of their dinner. Madison found herself sandwiched between her biological mother and the man who had become her father, while Lily's elbow somehow managed to poke everyone at once. When they settled back into their seats, the sunlight seemed even warmer, painting everything in shades of gold. Ethan looked around at their mismatched family, at Grace in her designer dress, sitting comfortably in his worn kitchen chair, at Madison's eyes bright with belonging, at Lily carefully spearing another pea with her fork, and felt his heart swell. He reached for his water glass, raising it in the afternoon light. The simple tap water sparkled like champagne as he held it up. To family, he said, his voice rich with emotion. Chosen and forever. To family? Lily echoed enthusiastically, nearly sloshing her milk in her excitement to join the toast. Madison and Grace raised their glasses too, the light streaming through the window falling across them like a blessing, transforming their small Sunday dinner into something sacred, a celebration of love, redemption, and the family they had all chosen to become. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.